Tom Kaplun, Superintendent of North Hempstead Country Club. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Anthony, thanks for having me.
You're a longtime friend of the program and member of the Long Island Golf Course Superintendents Association. I've known you a long time. Always do a great job at where you're at. And you've sort of wanted to start with you dipping in your hands into this Leaders on the Links program and talking about this apprenticeship program that you have going with NYSTA. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. Uh, yeah, so the Leadership on the Links program is just a podcast that Tyler Bloom Golf Partners does. Tyler was a former golf course superintendent who was very big into kind of like early stage apprenticeship program when he was at Sparrows Point Golf Club, which I believe was outside of Baltimore. And so when he was a superintendent, he always had a lot of things on social media, about high school students, kids that had graduated high school that came in, really set up kind of like a formalized training program for him. And then he ultimately went into the consulting business, and part of the consulting business really was his bringing his expertise on leadership and management of the golf course maintenance staffs really his uh to his business, and then taking that and working with that at state levels, which he did with us in NYSTA, to create formalized apprentice programs. Because when we first started talking about this, we noticed that this was back probably during or even before COVID. There was a work shortage in the turfgrass industry, as there were in many, and there still are in many of the skilled trade industries. But we looked at some of the industries that had been doing really well, the auto industry, for example, textiles manufacturing. And the common denominator that we found, and Tyler really backed this with statistics and facts, was that these companies or these, I don't want to say it, these types of businesses, they had, or industries, I should say, they had, some sort of apprentice program, which was kind of an alternate to the traditional 4 years of school, that allowed you to work and make full pay as you took your education and specialize in your trade. And so really, NYSTA, part of our mission has always been, government affairs, continuing education. How do we give back to our members is always a big question, that we ask ourselves, and that we look to give value to to our membership. So, so we met with Tyler, and we ended up partnering with him and working with him really in the state of New York to create an apprenticeship degree program, which gives somebody a certificate in turfgrass management, and even for equipment technicians, just like you can in the auto industry. Apprenticeship is big in New York State, where you can grab an apprenticeship, which allows you to, become an auto mechanic, so it gives you the education that you need to really advance yourself within your field of work. And so that's really where we ultimately went with this, because there was a labor shortage. Why is there a labor shortage? What can we do to make the industry more attractive for employees in New York State? How can we formalize things? How can we give people education, without this enormous cost associated with it? And so it's been a pretty successful program to start.
Now, a typical in a regular internship or an apprentice program, sometimes, an internship is paid, apprentice is usually you're getting pay. Is that something that's being subsidized by the state, or how is it being funded?
Well, the state is actually paying for the apprenticeship for the employee, and the employer is actually getting a tax credit going through the New York State apprentice program. So the program right now through SUNY Delhi is actually being subsidized through apprenticeship grant money, which is great because there's zero cost to the employee to take on the program. And the employee, see, the whole thing with apprenticeship is the employee is able to take online curriculum work and online classes while still working full time. So, for example, I have a gentleman right now who's in the apprentice program. He works full time for me, makes his full time pay, but also does his education on the in the after hours away from work.
Right. How many do you know roughly, or like how many kids or people are in the program at a time, or how much can they handle?
Yeah, we started out with like I think the most that SUNY Delhi could handle was 12 to start. I
Hmm.
believe we have 7 or 8 in the program right now, and I think we have so far we have another 6 signed on for next year to start in their first year of the program. So, but 12 seems like the cap. It seems like the cap per year, and there's funding there for 12, which is great.
Yeah. And so so they're basically getting I guess the in-person instruction with you, and then the sort of textbook instruction through Delhi, and they're like where the rubber meets the road. So it's kind of they get to put into practice what they're learning in school.
Yes, exactly. Really, what it does is, before this apprentice program, there was, like I had said on this leadership for the Links podcast that I did, there were some online short courses that could be done in the wintertime that could give somebody, I've come across 5 or 6 different workers in my career that have expressed an interest in getting more involved in, the management, the science component of managing, the golf course, even turf grass. Some of them have moved on and are now running school grounds programs um, in the New England area. And so, really, what I found was the education that they were getting online from other schools was great, but it just wasn't enough to give them the ability to, let's say somebody that has a 4 year degree from college, for example, right? Decides that they really love working on golf courses, that they love working on outside. They have the education and the expertise to become a manager, but they just don't have the science and the training that's required for the golf course. Because you have to remember, people forget that we're working with living things, and you have to understand the biology. You have to understand, certain things that come with the inputs that are needed for turf grass. There's a lot that has to be learned. And so that more expansive program that Delhi created allows for that extended learning at a pace that's fair and a pace that's manageable for the employee while continuing to work without, losing hours or taking away pay or taking on an exorbitant cost of the program.
Sure. So, typically in the past, before a program like this, you sort of, you would hire people and hopefully train them, and then hopefully they would sort of move up within North Hempstead, let's say, so to speak. And
Sure.
for example, is that still the goal, or is the goal, like any superintendent, is to sort of watch them grow up and then set them free, so to speak? How is it different than traditional pathways?
There still are many clubs and even, this branches outside even into the landscape industry because the New York State Turf Association really encompasses landscape sports fields and golf. So there still are many companies that will train from within. But I was a big proponent of, having had a 4 year education, having, gone to Cornell, which I remember my parents giving me flack for going to manage golf courses for going to Cornell,
Right.
but they had a great plant science department. Um, I've always been a big proponent of education, for my staff members if it's something that they express interest in. And the nice part about this program was I did not have to get involved in as much as I enjoy getting into the weeds per se, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Um, this was a more formalized pathway for recognition. So if there's somebody that wants to work for me and comes in, and let's say they come out of high school and they might not have the money to be able to go to college, or they might not want to go to 2 or 4 years of college, but they really like working on the golf course. Well, this is a good justification for me to be able to go to the membership and say, look, I'd like to move this person into an assistance position. This is the pathway of success that they've had, and it shows the motivation they've had, and it's just a good formalized program that allowed for that to happen. So, in my instance, with the apprentice, I have another gentleman who's going to be doing the apprenticeship next year. I am certainly not going to force those guys to move on. but I'm certainly not going to prevent them from moving on, as I think I've said before, and I say to everybody that I hire, your job is to help, me make the golf course as best as it can be for our membership. And then in turn, our job for you is to help you, advance your career if this is what you want to do in any way we can, So it's a good symbiotic relationship that we have.
Yeah. And you're giving them an opportunity to earn a certificate, which is what you're going to need if you want to be an assistant superintendent, and with the goal of being a head superintendent or a director of agronomy or whatever the case may be. You're on the pathway to gaining a through an accredited institution whether it's a bachelor's or whatever, however they categorize it.
Sure, exactly. Because ultimately, like when somebody comes to you and asks you for a raise, it's the question that you have to pose to the employee is, okay, a raise may be warranted, but what other level of responsibility are you willing to take on, that comes with that increase in pay?
Sure.
And so, for somebody that's in the industry that, that has worked in turf grass, that enjoys it, that likes it, that has started to kind of informally but formally make it a career, this can be the difference in somebody making an extra 10, 15, $20,000 a year.
Sure. The other thing I'm thinking is that it also lends itself and seems like it would pair very well with high school tech programs. You have, if kids can take an AP program and take AP World or AP Gov or whatever the case may be and get a college level credit, maybe the next step to this apprentice program is getting kids credit to an Adelphi program, I mean, to a Delhi program, where now they can work, during the summers, obviously, and then maybe part of the morning or whatever the case may be, as part of this apprentice program, but on a high school level, and get credits towards their Delhi education in advance.
I think that that is an excellent idea. I think it's something that, we worked on the apprentice program, and then when we go to the state level, what we find out is, you look at programs that have had success, like the Future Farmers of America does
Yep,
a great job with education into school districts across the state.
sure.
And so we look at ways that we be maybe able to introduce turf curriculum, whether it be a 3-week module, in a elective science class, for example.
Yep,
Yes, those are certainly avenues that we're in the process of exploring, because the biggest thing that we found out of again, this comes out of even one of Tyler Bloom's surveys, is there's a lot of kids coming out of school that just don't even know that there are opportunities to work on golf courses. And it doesn't even have to be on the actual golf course. It can be in the kitchen. It can be in the pro shop. There's a lot of, I mean, it's a hospitality business, right?
sure.
So in hospitality and leisure. So there are a lot of different pathways for employment, on golf and in this industry.
Sure. Um, just going back real quick to their on-hand experience or real-world experience, I would think ideally if like, if you were a club that was able to, when you have an apprentice, it's usually, is their day made up of what you need them to do or the experience that you want them to get? Do they spend, 2 weeks with a weed whacker and doing a lawnmower? Do they spend another 2 weeks on a machine? Do they spend 2 weeks in the equipment manager's shed working on how to, sharpen edges and clean the machines and keep them sharp or whatever the case may be? Or is it more, obviously as we get into the spring now where things get a little hairy, or are they more just kind of just managing what you need them to do on a daily basis?
They're managing and they're working in what you need them to do on a daily basis, but you are also to making sure that, so there's a blue book that we have in this apprentice program, for example.
Okay,
And the blue book has, specific outlines of, instructional things that they need to do, and, hours that they need to obtain, which is pretty simple. But I think I said this before, the nice part about this is that blue book. when I go and I reference it, there are things in that blue book that I can look at and say, okay, you know what? I need to take Ryan and have him spend some more time doing, A, B, C, or D.
Hmm.
And in the past, I've always been very good at if somebody comes to me and has a real interest in, which I have had some people with no education, they've had an interest in really wanting to learn all the facets of managing the golf course.
Hmm.
But there are things as an employer that you still overlook, right? You're going to focus on the things that you do well,
Right.
and overlook some of the other things that you might not know, how to do well.
Sure.
And so what I like about the Blue Book program is that there's things in there that maybe I never even learned, as it relates to some of the equipment repairs
Hmm.
and those things in there help me, kind of think outside the box so that apprentice will have some introduction and some experience in, those types of tasks that take place. Um, so that is what I like about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, in a sense, it's a reference to help you sharpen your edges. No pun intended. Because
Right.
obviously there's always, and I'm assuming this curriculum is going to evolve, and so there's always going to be new best practices that evolve, and so this is a way for you to not only strengthen your weaknesses, but also learn new techniques that are coming out and keep you on the sort of ahead of the curve. Like this program is ahead of the, you're trying to be ahead of the curve. I think that's one of the things that I always liked about you was because you're always thinking of what's the next step. So how are we, like you looked back before COVID or whatever, like you knew there was a labor shortage and you start thinking about those questions and look at it on a bigger, on a bigger scale and to meet the needs of the future. And this is a way you're doing that. And I think that's excellent.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. I mean, as superintendents, I think what encompasses a good superintendent and anybody that's a good, manager and is what is the next step, and that's how I've always approached managing the golf course and working with a very good membership is kind of figuring out what's the next step, trying to stay ahead of the curve. And as you gain years of experience in any practice, you become better at being able to also figure out how to not really, so I guess it's not stay ahead of the curve, but my goal is when I hire people to come work on my staff at North Hempstead, the last thing I want to do is to hire people and then lose people, it's funny because I used to go to a lot of seminars that focused on human resource, business management of employees and staff. And I used to always kind of shove off the fact that, oh, if I lose a couple guys here, a couple guys there, I'll be fine. But it really does become costly for the business
Sure.
because you have to try and find somebody, retrain that person. And so that's something that I have really come to value is hiring good people, treating them well, making sure that they can go out and execute, the vision or, whatever the membership's looking for, and, compensating them fairly. And you know what? It creates a well-oiled machine.
Sure. Absolutely. I want to just shift gears, well, a little bit, only because you're still involved with the state, but you also, over the winter, if I'm not mistaken, went up to Albany. Can you tell us, and this seems to be an annual thing that you guys do, can you sort of just you tell our listeners and our viewers what that trip is all about?
Yeah, sure. We do the New York State Turfgrass Association does a turf advocacy. It used to be called Turf Lobby Day, Turfgrass Lobby Day up in Albany. We kind of rolled it over into turfgrass advocacy because there are times where we're not really going up and lobbying per se against certain bills that might hurt our industry.
Hmm.
But we're always going up and advocating for the green industry in New York State. And so this when I came on the board, I've always had um a liking to working, in government affairs, to advocating for our industry because I really like, what I do and and passionate about protecting what we have here in New York State in terms of golf courses and the green industry. And so when I came on the NYSTA board, I worked with some great people: Steve Griffin, who owns Saratoga Sod Farms; Mike Maffei, who was the superintendent at Morifar Golf Club. They really started this New York State Turfgrass Lobby Day, where they would go up to Albany, meet with legislatures, talk about some of the bills that they were concerned with that might come to the floor in our industry, and also too advocate for money for this Turfgrass Environmental Stewardship Fund. And the Turfgrass Environmental Stewardship Fund is the money is repurposed to help education, to help with things like helped with the cost of getting our apprentice program up and running. It helped create the New York State BMPs. It was a major contributor to this golf course environmental and economic impact study that'll be coming out later this year in New York State. And so what we do is we go up to Albany, and we meet with legislatures in both the House and the Senate, and we really speak to them, about our industry, thank them a lot of the times for their support, because this is something that has to get approved in the governor's state budget. And and we make the ask for for the money that we have in the that we're asking for the fund. And if there are some bills that we do not like, or some bills even that we support, we will let the legislatures know that. So it really is a great day. It was a very hard time during COVID, because obviously the Capitol was on lockdown.
Yeah,
So we had to go to Zoom for a couple years, and then we made the decision to go back to Albany. And I'm so glad that we did, because there's something to be said for face-to-face interaction. I think that we've all learned, Zoom is great and convenient for certain things, like you and I sitting here talking right now,
sure.
but that face-to-face interaction and a nice handshake and a nice in-person meeting, goes a long way.
Absolutely. Is there still a level of where you feel you still have to, when you go to Albany specifically, misunderstandings, myths about inputs and outputs, and how, the water, how you're affecting the environment that you're working in? Do you still fight that battle?
I think we've done a much better job at trying to it kind of turning the it not turning so much, but taking a little bit more control of the narrative in a factual way, in a way that's truthful and more honest.
Sure.
In my 10 years of working in government affairs now, the one thing that I've realized is you're always going to have the people who are very passionate about the environment, and you're not going to find common ground with some people, and so um, going into a legislature's office who's backed by somebody like the National Resource Defense Council. Okay. They're getting millions of dollars from this organization, right? And in some ways, that's probably subsidizing, what they're doing in the state, and helping them out. You're not going to find common ground with them. So, we found better ways to be more productive when we go to Albany, in terms of meeting with legislatures that maybe are more middle of the road, that understand, the economic importance, particularly of golf in New York State.
Sure.
Understand the economic importance, and also, working to highlight, the environmental benefits, what we do, how we apply science, even to water use. There's a lot of pressure on water use on Long Island right now,
Hmm.
that's taking place. And so, the advocacy and the education is what we have to do. And that's why it's so important to keep going to Albany, meeting with legislatures, meeting with people from the Department of Environmental Conservation, and just asking for a seat at the table.
Sure. And I think people have to understand that that's a sort of antiquated argument that golf courses are bad for the environment, just because, and the only thing they can say is fertilizers. But, even that industry is evolving, and things aren't as, I don't want to use the word toxic or bad, but things have, there are things that have improved, I should say.
Yeah, well, what bothers me, and sorry to cut you off, but
No, no, go ahead.
what bothers me with New York State somewhat is, for example, a few years ago, this act was put into place, the Community Climate Protection Act.
Mhm.
Okay, and that was a very ambitious goal set forth by the legislature to reduce carbon emissions by X amount of percent by don't quote me on the exact years,
Gotcha.
but I think it was believed by 2030, and then by 2035, and then by 2050. And so if you go on this Community Climate Protection Act website, right, and you go to the environmental section, and you don't see any pictures on there of anything as it relates to some of the most beautiful areas in New York State, which happen to be areas that encompass a lot of turf grass in them.
Right.
Whether it be golf courses, whether it be Central Park,
Right.
whether it be, some of the sports fields that we have. And so I do not like that there's a big misnomer, or misconception that's out there. But it seems like that misnomer, that misconception, for whatever reason, continues to get broadcast out there.
Yeah.
I think is evident by COVID. We golf courses and even outdoor green spaces for recreation are huge for people's mental well-being. They're huge for sports activity.
Yep.
There's been a tremendous uptick in that. There's been a great resurgence in the number of athletic facilities that have gone back to natural grass versus the synthetic turf.
Sure.
And so, like I said, it just continues to be our job to educate and to debunk those myths.
Yeah, well, it's certainly good to hear that you guys have come a long way in sort of turning the tide on that what we I would call an oversimplification of what a proposed or a supposed problem is, where it's really maybe not a problem at all. But I think like you said, it's just something that you always have to stay in front of because people, even like you said before, for whatever reason, they just sort of latch on to whatever oversimplified negative thing that they can repeat to somebody else. It makes it easier for their argument. And it's just nice to hear that you guys are, continue to educate, continue to fight that fight because it's important to protect our green spaces.
Yes, you're exactly right. It is like I laughed. I saw a New York Post article, and I think I actually wrote a response to the New York Post article about the candidate that's running for mayor. I think Brad Linder's his name,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken. And he wanted to take I think three or four of the city golf courses and make them into housing locations,
Right,
right? For government subsidized housing. Hey, I'm all for providing the housing for people. If they don't have housing, everybody should have housing.
sure.
But you're going to go after the golf courses, the green space in New York City. There's so little green space in New York City to begin with.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of a laugh. It's a laugh of a proposal. I mean, drive through New York City and look at all the empty buildings that are there in the streets. The sections and blocks that are run down, and
Right.
you're going to go after the green space in New York State because you think that all the golfers there can just go play at five courses versus the eight courses. I mean, it's
Yeah.
some of the stuff is laughable. I get pretty worked up about it.
That's all right. But no, to your point though, and also you can't also talk about we've normalized mental health, right? That dialogue. And
Sure.
so you understand the importance of nature in that, regardless of how it's used. Nature's important as an important part of obviously our chemical makeup by we needing vitamin D and being outside and our bone density, like all these things that we need. And to be healthy in body and mind, the one thing you don't want to do is take away a limited resource that we have to begin with.
That's right. And you take away that resource, you take away that 80 acres. I mean, let's use a golf course. Pick a golf course in New York City.
Yeah. Yeah, Van Cortlandt
What?
or whatever,
What's
right?
that?
Van Cortlandt in the Bronx, right?
Sure, you take away Van Cortlandt in the Bronx. Tons, great many people from around there go to that golf course to play.
It's packed with
Now, where are they going to go, and what are they going to do for their daily activity on a Saturday, Sunday? They're
yeah,
already dealing with congestion pricing.
100%.
Now they're going to have to cross bridges probably to get somewhere,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So there's that outlet that's there. There's probably, I would imagine it's at many of these golf courses, there's a junior MGA or a GolfWorks program
Yeah.
that exposes kids to the game that might be able to just walk to the golf course versus having to get transportation to the golf course. I mean, these are the things that become impacted, which all ties back to the mental health and people's mental well-being, like you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I always like to, when I have you on, it's usually early on in the season, before we get to the spring, just sort of for our viewers, maybe some people, obviously we're going to get a lot of superintendents that watch this, or listen to this, but just, maybe to the sort of people who are just tuning in and not having had the opportunity to get a peek on the green side of the golf industry. How important is the winter for you, not only to recharge your batteries because the summer is such a huge push, but just in terms of getting ready and maintaining equipment and the golf course and doing winter projects to get ready for that big push in the summer?
Sure. Well, the last few winters have been seasonably mild. I mean,
Right.
this winter we had a little bit of snow, but prior to this winter, in the last few winters, I mean, we've gotten some great work done in terms of improvements, that take place on the golf course, as have many courses around the area. And so, with the milder winters, becomes more of an opportunity to kind of, as we said earlier in the program, stay ahead of the curve with what you can do out on the golf course. And then there's always the equipment maintenance that takes place, and a lot of it being preventative maintenance. I mean, that's another big thing, that can be semi-political, but I won't go into the politics of it. But the cost of equipment has become so incredible over the last 7 or 8 years that preserving and protecting this equipment is crucial and vital. And so, I've seen a big trend in my time where I used to have my equipment technician take care of the equipment, where I might give him 2 to 3 guys during the winter time that can work with him to make sure that we're really thoroughly going through this equipment well and doing the necessary repairs and preventative maintenance on it. Not that he can't do it alone, but it helps to have some people working with him so we can get through more of it in a more efficient fashion and get to some major stuff, because the cost is simply is gotten to a point on some of this equipment where it's hard for me to stomach. So I'm trying to hold on to as much as I can for as long as I can.
Oh, of course. Just curious, and again, not to get into the politics of anything,
Sure.
but there are things that you can plan for. Let's say, for example, if you hear that they're going to raise minimum wage or whatever the case, like that's usually set for a certain time period. And so
Correct.
you can sort of build into that. You can sort of work your way and understand budget wise to be ready to meet that need. Okay. What happens on something like, something that's happening more in a real time, let's say for the tariffs, not getting into anything about them. I'm just saying when you talk about the cost of equipment and you talk about, and you have a change of administration, it doesn't matter. I don't care what you believe in or not believe in. I'm just saying there's a real economic factor that matters in real time for someone like yourself. How do you guys handle something that's happening in real time like that?
Well, the simple answer for me is it's the cost of doing business,
Yeah.
right? But with that being said, it certainly is a factor. I think right now, with the tariff policies that are taking place, how this will affect per se, like chemical and fertilizer sales when they come from most of it's produced, outside of the country and brought in. And I think there are some things that you're going to possibly have to pay for more. But then what, for people like myself, superintendents, and whenever it comes to cost, it's really having to sit down, make some calculated decisions, take those decisions to leadership at the club, have some meetings, whether it be with the general manager, whether it be with your board of directors, and having them understand, and figuring out ways that you can absorb the added cost, or maybe there's some things that need to certainly be scaled back. And so that's where it becomes important. Like I have every year I sit down when I do a budget. I kind of start at ground zero and work up from there. And thankfully, in our business, they industry reps that we work with and the salespeople that we work with are very good at letting us know when impending increases might be coming. And so, there is a little bit of lag time when we can make some adjustments. And, communication's key though, like anything else.
Sure,
Communication, transparency, to the people, to the members, and to the, into um the general manager.
sure. How would you, I mean, the spring has been a little bit of touch and go here. We've had a lot of rain. How is this spring? I mean, mild winter, like you said, although it was, once it got cold, it was pretty windy. We've had a lot of wind days, I would say, more in the winter, and now we're getting a lot of rain. How is this spring shaping up to be in terms of production?
It's been fantastic so far because it was I mean, we went through one of the driest falls, I think, in the history of since they've been recording weather. And so there was a tremendous amount of stress that was put on the turf late into the season, as late into November.
Okay.
And so over the winter, and even over the winter, we had a few snowfalls, but they seemed to melt quick. And so I would probably say, I would guess probably over the last 6 to 8 months, we're probably still at a rainfall deficit.
Wow.
And so that moisture, that the rain that we've had this spring has been well needed in helping a lot of areas recover from the drought last fall.
Mhm.
It's one thing when you get a drought in the spring and then you get some rain because it's getting warmer out, the grass and the turf has a chance to grow and recover.
Right.
In the fall, everything's starting to get cooler and
Right.
the nights are getting you're not getting as much sunlight, and so the plant is starting to shut down. Well, when that grass starts to get stressed, it's not like it's getting the sunlight, the warm weather that it needs to regrow, and so I think it's been a very good spring. I wish that it was a little bit drier on the weekends because I want people out on the golf course, playing out on the golf course. So, it's like anything else. Give me a little bit of rain Monday, Tuesday, even Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Let it be like this.
Yeah. Just curious, just thinking about the Truist tournament championship that the PGA is playing at the Philly Cricket Club. Amazing golf course, by the way, if you haven't known or heard already. It's just it's unbelievable. It's beautiful. Just curious, maybe you can enlighten some of us, given that it was an optimal spring, so to speak. And that obviously must have helped that superintendent get that golf course ready, not just for its members, but for the PGA Tour, which is sort of the elite, obviously the elite customer, so to speak. What did, given the normal circumstances of the weather, what did that superintendent have to do maybe differently than you would normally do a regular to get ready for opening day of the season?
I mean, when you're hosting a major event like that early in the season up in this area, maybe the inputs to open the golf course, to get the golf course, to look a little, greener on television,
Sure.
maybe you have to increase those a small amount. But I don't really know, Anthony, to be candid with you, I don't really know how much superintendents have become so good, and the products that we use have become so good at being able to give us what we want. Obviously mother nature has to cooperate,
Sure.
but we've become very good at being able to adapt and adjust it. I would imagine that the superintendent of Philadelphia Cricket Club right now has that golf course. It's probably in the same shape as it would be in any other year
Hmm.
for his membership that comes into play.
Yep. Well, part of the reason why you guys are so good is because, like we spoke earlier, you stay educated, you stay on top of issues and that are relevant to the day, and you, like we said, you stay ahead of the curve. Tom, I really appreciate your time today. I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for carving out a piece of your day for me and for our viewers and listeners. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anthony.
All right, thanks, Tom. Thanks for being with us.
Take care. Bye bye.